Let's do this! Come on. Now we're getting somewhere.
Hey guys, let's talk a little bit about Overwatch and RAM speed. But first let me give you some context. About a month ago I thought, maybe I should buy a GTX 1080. It's future proofing, it's the latest series, I've got a 970 at the minute and I thought, well, you know, it would be nice to have an 80 this time. £540 is not the most expensive, you know, maybe I'll do it. Then I kind of considered, well, what do I even play? You know, I'm playing Overwatch most of the time and what's the point? You know, I don't really need to max out the FPS in that. And, you know, I don't really play games like The Witcher that much. But I've got it. So I put it off for the time being. And then the next day I thought, yeah, go on then, I'll do it. So I bought the GTX 1080. And I thought, okay, well, let's test it out in The Witcher, you know, downscale it from 4K and let's see how it looks. Looks great, you know, high frame rate, perfect. And then I thought, well, let's take it to Overwatch then. Let's see what I've got. So I had about maybe 160, 170 FPS before. I only play on low anyway because I'm trying to maximise the frames. So have a little look at it. 190 FPS. Like I've gained, what, 20 in total? That doesn't seem very realistic. So I kind of take to the internet and have a little look into it. And a lot of people are saying that RAM speed seems to have some kind of impact on Overwatch. I mean, these are specifically threads related to the 10 series cards. Mainly because if you've got a decent CPU, like an i7, i5, overclocked, you're not really going to have an issue if you've got a 10 series card. You've got a pretty strong system there. There should never be any area where you're lacking in FPS, unless the game is poorly optimized. Overwatch isn't really that poorly optimized though. Especially on low settings, you shouldn't be getting that low FPS. I know it's not low to most people, but when you spend that much money on a card and a decent setup, you'd expect to be getting near 300, kind of like you do with Counter-Strike. So people were saying about the RAM speed, and I thought, well, I don't really want to be upgrading my RAM. I was actually running 3 sticks of 4 gig 133 megahertz Kingston RAM. It was old. It was, you know, from 6 years ago when I built my first PC. So it wasn't very good RAM. And I kind of thought, well, maybe these threads have got some kind of substance to them. Maybe these people are actually onto something. Maybe the RAM does make a difference. And I thought, well, you know, I can't justify it right now. There's no point. I've already spent this much on a graphics card. I don't need these frames in Overwatch. Then I thought, nah, go on then, I do. So I bought a set of 16 gig Corsair Vengeance 2400 megahertz RAM. And I set to testing it out. So first, let's take a look at the old RAM, the 1333 megahertz RAM. Let's look at the frames that I was getting there. 133 megahertz RAM, as you can see from CPU Z, and we're getting about 150 FPS in combat, up to around 180 outside of combat. This is with an i7 3770K overclocked to 4.4 GHz and a GTX 1080. Seems oddly low, doesn't it? It's consistent enough, but it is pretty low for that kind of setup. You'd expect to lose some frames when fighting, due to the increase in effects and everything that comes with other people being visible on your screen, but this test is performed with nothing else running in the background. Both of these tests are running on the exact same settings as well. But some of you are running very similar frame rates on lesser CPUs and graphics cards. Also, I don't play Tracer off. So let's take a look at it with the new RAM. I only managed to get this RAM to a stable 2200 MHz, but still a pretty sizable jump from 1333 MHz. And as you can see, I've gained a pretty reasonable amount of FPS to go with it. I wish I could have recorded the same map again, but I tried for a good hour to land on Nepal. It just wasn't happening, so this will have to do. It's not quite 300 FPS, and I'm not sure what more I could do to try and achieve that, but it's a pretty great increase and reduces the input lag by a good chunk. We're looking at, 280, 290 FPS outside of combat, dropping to, a low of around 250 FPS in combat. I'm not saying this will work for you. It entirely depends on your own setup. If you're already bottlenecked by your GPU or CPU, then RAM quite possibly won't have any impact. But if you're in a similar situation with quite a low clock speed RAM, it might be worth considering before getting carried away and buying yourself something like, a GTX 1080? After all, Overwatch isn't very GPU heavy anyway. Thanks for watching. Let me know what kind of frame rates you're seeing with your setup. I'd especially like to know what kind of RAM speed you have, and whether or not you're on DDR4.